Captain Elena Martinez leaned against the cold metal railing of the flight deck, staring at the imposing silhouette of the A-64 Apache. The sun glinted off its sleek rotors, casting sharp shadows on the tarmac below. For years, she had dreamt of this moment. Since childhood, watching helicopters streak across the skies above Phoenix, she had imagined herself gripping the controls of the most powerful attack helicopter in the Army's arsenal. But now, after years of proving herself, the reality of her situation hit her like a punch to the chest. She was still forbidden to fly it. The barrier wasn't written anywhere official. No memo, no regulation explicitly said, Captain Martinez cannot pilot an Apache. But it existed in every sideways glance from her superior officers, in every promotion denied, in every training assignment subtly rerouted. She had passed every test, aced every flight simulation, and logged thousands of hours in other helicopters. Yet the Apache remained out of reach, a gleaming symbol of both desire and frustration. Elena's hands clenched on the railing. She could almost hear the machine calling her name, like it sensed her longing, her determination. Around her, other pilots moved with effortless confidence, climbing into cockpits as though they belonged to them by birthright. She had worked harder than most, yet the invisible ceiling remained, unyielding. Her gaze drifted upward as the rotors began to spin on a nearby Apache. The vibration thrummed through her chest, resonating with a heartbeat she had tried to ignore for years. Her instructor, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, approached, his presence a mix of authority and reluctant empathy. "You're not scheduled for this class," he said softly, almost apologetically. "You know that, right?" "I know," Elena replied, her voice tight, almost bitter. "But I have to be here. I can't just wait while someone else flies it. I've earned this." Harris shook his head, exhaling heavily. "Elena, it's not about earning. It's about politics, perception, and prejudice. You're exceptional, but this is bigger than skill, bigger than merit." Elena's stomach knotted. She had fought every obstacle, from doubting peers to dismissive superiors. She had risen faster than most, yet something about the Apache, its lethal precision, its history of combat victories, its raw, violent grace, seemed to awaken an old fear in everyone around her. Some believed the cockpit of an Apache was too demanding for anyone not hand-picked, a sacred space reserved for a narrow, traditional profile. Elena refused to accept that narrative. As she spoke, her mind replayed the countless nights she had stayed late at the hangar, watching technicians calibrate the systems, memorizing every dial, every readout. She had studied flight manuals cover to cover, simulated missions countless times, even practiced emergency maneuvers in ways most pilots would find obsessive. Her passion was not casual. It was a burning, relentless drive. And yet here she was, on the verge of seeing her dream and being denied once again. Her communicator beeped, breaking her reverie. "Captain Martinez," the voice said, calm and precise. "Report to the Admiral immediately. He requests your presence." Elena's breath caught. The Admiral, the man who had the power to make or break careers, whose nod alone could change the trajectory of a soldier's life. The walk to his office felt surreal, each step echoing like a drumbeat in a silent auditorium. She passed rows of offices, decorated with medals and plaques, reminders of accomplishments that had once felt within her reach but now seemed part of someone else's story. When she entered, the Admiral looked up from a stack of reports. His sharp eyes, gray and unyielding, pinned her to the floor as though weighing the weight of her ambition against the reality of the institution. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Elena sat, trying to calm her racing heart, aware that every detail of her demeanor was under scrutiny. "Captain Martinez," he began, his voice steady but carrying an unspoken gravity. "I understand you've encountered obstacles regarding the Apache." "Yes, sir," Elena said, her voice firm despite the tension. "I've proven myself in every other aircraft. I know I can handle it. I'm ready." He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. There was a pause, a long, deliberate silence that made the air feel thick and heavy. Alina felt as though every second stretched into eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying the pounding of her heart. Then, in a voice that was measured yet carried an unshakable authority, he said 5 words that froze her in place. "You've already proven them wrong." The words struck her like lightning. For a moment, Alina could only stare, unable to process the gravity of what he had said. Those 5 words were more than encouragement. They were a validation, a challenge, and a key turning in a lock that had kept her out of the Apache cockpit for years. Her hands, which had gripped the railing of the flight deck just minutes ago, now shook slightly in a surge of adrenaline. "You understand what this means," the Admiral continued, his tone measured. "You have the opportunity to take what was denied and make it yours, but it will not be easy. No one will hand it to you. The system will resist. Your colleagues, some will doubt you. Some will resent you. But you, Captain Martinez, you have the skill, the determination, and the instinct to succeed." Alina swallowed, a mix of fear and exhilaration flooding through her. She had fought for recognition before, but nothing like this. The Apache was not just another helicopter. It was a symbol, a pinnacle of military aviation, and a test of every ounce of her ability and courage. Now she had the chance to prove to everyone, her peers, her superiors, the doubters, and herself, that she belonged. As she left the Admiral's office, the weight of those words settled over her like a cloak. The hangar seemed different now, alive with possibility rather than intimidation. Every shadow cast by the towering aircraft, every shimmer of sunlight on the rotors, seemed to whisper encouragement. The challenge ahead was immense. She would have to learn faster, react quicker, and push boundaries farther than she ever had. But for the first time in years, Alina felt a spark of uncontainable hope. Yet doubt still lingered at the edges of her mind. Would her skills be enough to survive the first flight in the Apache? Would the instructors, the system, the unspoken resistance crush her spirit? And most importantly, when she finally gripped the controls of the helicopter she had longed to fly, would she rise? Or would all the obstacles she had fought against come crashing down? The engines of the nearby Apache roared to life, echoing through the hangar. Alina's fingers itched for the controls, her body responding instinctively to a machine she had never yet flown. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in the smell of oil, metal, and anticipation. This was the moment she had waited for, dreamed for, and fought for. But she knew one thing: nothing would be the same after today. And just as the rotors began to hum with rising intensity, the communicator beeped again. "Alina Martinez, your instructor is waiting on the tarmac. You need to move now." Her heart jumped. This was it, the threshold she had longed to cross. The dream that had almost died years ago was finally within reach. Yet as she strode toward the aircraft, adrenaline mingled with fear. The Apache loomed like a beast, waiting for its pilot to prove herself. One wrong move, one hesitation, and everything she had worked for could vanish in an instant. Alina took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and whispered under her breath, "I belong here." And with that, she stepped onto the tarmac, each step a declaration of courage, determination, and the first spark of a journey that would test her in ways no one could predict. The sky was hers to claim, but first, she had to survive the flight that had been forbidden to her for so long. Alina Martinez walked briskly across the tarmac, the sun already climbing higher, glinting off the sleek fuselage of the A-64 Apache. The rotors spun slowly, casting long, serrated shadows across the ground. Every pilot who passed her seemed to move with effortless assurance, as though the sky itself bent to their will. For Alina, every step toward the helicopter was a mixture of exhilaration and dread. She had trained for this moment for years, yet the weight of the unspoken restrictions, the whispers behind closed doors, and the skepticism of her peers pressed on her chest like lead. The hangar doors loomed ahead, stretching toward the ceiling like the entrance to some cathedral of aviation. Inside were rows of military helicopters, each polished and pristine, their lethal forms glowing under the overhead lights. She passed portraits of decorated pilots, men whose accomplishments were immortalized in brass plaques. Some faces looked familiar from military briefings. Others were legends she had only read about. Each portrait was a reminder of the ceilings she had shattered, and the ones that still remained. Her instructor, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, was already standing by the Apache, clipboard in hand. His expression was unreadable, part warning, part challenge. "You ready for this?" he asked. His voice was calm, but Alina caught the undercurrent of tension. This wasn't just a training flight. This was the first test of everything she had ever fought for. "I'm ready," she said, trying to infuse her voice with certainty she didn't entirely feel. Her pulse raced, fingers twitching in anticipation. The cockpit of the Apache loomed like an engine of destiny, and every second closer intensified the storm of emotions inside her. Anticipation, fear, determination, and a flicker of doubt that refused to vanish entirely. Harris nodded, gesturing toward the helicopter. "Climb in. Let's see if all those hours you spent grinding in simulators translate to the real thing." As Alina approached the steps to the cockpit, her mind flashed back to all the moments she had been told no. Being passed over for promotion, being redirected to lesser aircraft, being stared at in disbelief when she'd scored higher than male colleagues in combat simulations. Every rejection had built a wall inside her, a mix of resilience and simmering frustration. Now, she was about to confront that wall head-on. She climbed into the cockpit, the seat cold beneath her as she settled in. The array of instruments, switches, and readouts stretched out like a maze of possibilities. The Apache wasn't forgiving. It was designed to respond instantly, violently, to hesitation. One slip, one miscalculation, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Harris came up beside her, leaning slightly over the edge of the cockpit. "Listen," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "They don't want you here. The system, the bureaucracy, the people who decide who flies this bird, they'll resist. Some of them think you're a risk, and some, they're just afraid you'll prove them wrong. Remember, Martinez, this is more than flying. This is a statement." Alina swallowed, letting the words sink in. Every nerve in her body tingled with adrenaline. She could feel the raw power of the Apache beneath her, its engines humming like a caged beast ready to leap into the sky. She gripped the controls lightly, testing their weight and responsiveness, imagining herself slicing through the clouds, maneuvering with precision and instinct. The pre-flight checklist began. Every flick of a switch, every dial she adjusted, was scrutinized by Harris and by the echoing silence of the hangar. The Apache responded immediately to her touch, shivering beneath her fingers, alive and impatient. The systems lit up in a symphony of blinking lights and digital readouts, each confirming that the helicopter was ready. Yet despite the reassurance, doubt clawed at the edges of her mind. What if all the simulations in the world weren't enough? What if the machine demanded something beyond her capabilities? Harris leaned close. "Take off in 3, 2, 1. His voice faded as Alina pushed the collective lever forward. The Apache lurched, rotors cutting the air in a blur. Her stomach flipped as the ground fell away. For a split second, she felt the raw, unfiltered thrill of flight, the sensation she had craved for so long, but with exhilaration came terror. The Apache was unforgiving, demanding precision in every movement, a dance between human skill and mechanical might. The first few maneuvers were simple, designed to test her ability to control altitude and balance. Yet even in these basic movements, the helicopter responded with a temperamental unpredictability. Alina adjusted, corrected, anticipated, every reflex honed by years of simulation and determination. Harris's voice crackled through the calm but deliberate. "You're doing fine, Martinez, but remember, one mistake and the Apache won't forgive you." A sudden vibration shook the cockpit, a minor mechanical warning but enough to make her pulse spike. Her hands tightened around the controls. The rotors howled overhead, and for a moment she felt the old fear creeping in. Doubt whispered in her ear. What if this was a mistake? What if she wasn't ready? She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the Admiral's words. "You've already proven them wrong." The memory ignited a spark within her. Every rejection, every doubt, every whispered no she had heard throughout her career surged through her veins, transforming into raw determination. She opened her eyes, focused on the instruments and the horizon, and pushed the Apache to respond with the grace she knew she could summon. The flight grew progressively more challenging. Harris introduced rapid altitude changes, sharp turns, and emergency procedures. Each maneuver tested not just her skill but her composure under pressure. The Apache bucked and tilted, the wind howling past the cockpit, yet Alina responded with instinctive precision. She felt herself synchronizing with the machine, becoming one with its power and complexity. Then the unexpected struck. A simulated system failure was triggered, a warning light flashed red and an alarm blared. Harris's voice was calm but urgent. "Hydraulic failure. React immediately." Alina's heart raced. Her fingers moved over the controls, recalling emergency protocols she had drilled hundreds of times in simulations. The Apache shuddered violently, the ground rushing past in a dizzying blur as she fought to stabilize the aircraft. Time slowed. Every second stretched into eternity. Sweat ran down her forehead, her muscles burned with tension, but she refused to panic. She relied on instinct, training, and sheer force of will. Slowly, methodically, she regained control. The alarm ceased, the machine stabilized, and the world steadied once more. Harris exhaled audibly through the comm. "Impressive, Martinez. Very impressive. Most pilots would have folded under that pressure." Alina's chest heaved. Relief mingled with exhilaration. She had just faced a crisis that many seasoned pilots might have failed. She realized, with a mix of triumph and disbelief, that she was capable of flying the Apache, not just surviving but mastering it. As she prepared to land, the hangar looming in the distance, Alina felt the weight of the day's lesson settle over her. The barriers that had kept her from this cockpit were not gone. They were structural, bureaucratic, ingrained. But she now possessed proof that skill, courage, and determination could override prejudice and doubt. When the rotors finally slowed to a stop and the engines powered down, Alina exhaled deeply. The first forbidden flight was complete. She had survived. She had thrived. And yet, as Harris approached with a measured nod, she felt the tension of what lay ahead. The real tests were not in the simulator or the training exercises. They were in the battles, the missions, and the unyielding scrutiny of those who still doubted her. The Admiral's 5 words echoed in her mind again. "You've already proven them wrong." But even as she stepped out of the cockpit, Alina knew one truth: proving herself to the system was only the beginning. The real challenge, the one that would define her legacy, was still waiting in the skies above. And as she looked up at the spinning rotors, the tarmac stretched beneath her like a battlefield of possibility, Alina felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and the fierce hunger to rise. The Apache had tested her, and she had passed, but what would come next could either cement her as a legend or crush the dream that had fueled her entire life. The horizon shimmered under the desert sun, endless and uncertain, as Alina Martinez prepared for what no one had ever expected her to do. The roar of the Apache's engines cut through the pre-dawn desert air, vibrating through Alina Martinez's chest as she adjusted the seat harness. Every fiber of her being was alive, nervous energy, exhilaration, and a sharp edge of fear coiling together like lightning before a storm. This was no longer a training exercise. Today she would take the forbidden flight, the Apache that had been kept from her for years. Every glance, every whisper, every decision that had told her no led to this exact moment. Lieutenant Colonel Harris sat beside her, expression unreadable. "Remember, Martinez," he said, voice calm but laced with gravity, "they've never allowed someone like you in this cockpit. Your superiors, the system, your peers, they expect failure. Don't give it to them. Show them what you're made of." Alina nodded, swallowing the lump of fear lodged in her throat. She had been waiting for this day, dreaming of it since she was a child watching helicopters streak across the Arizona sky. But dreaming and surviving were two entirely different things. The Apache wasn't just powerful, it was alive, unpredictable, and merciless if not treated with respect. The rotors spun faster, slicing the desert wind as Alina guided the aircraft toward the sky. The first liftoff was smooth yet tense, the machine responding instantly to her touch. She felt the familiar thrill of flight coursing through her veins, but there was also a gnawing awareness. One misstep, and everything she had fought for could crumble in an instant. "Take us through the hover check," Harris instructed. His voice cut through the roar of the engines. Alina exhaled slowly, focusing on the instruments, her eyes scanning every dial, every warning light. She adjusted the collective, fine-tuning the lift as the Apache hovered above the tarmac. The machine shivered under her touch, alive and responsive, as if testing her resolve. Then came the first maneuver, a rapid roll to simulate evasive action. The Apache tilted sharply and Alina's stomach lurched. Her hands reacted instinctively, coaxing the aircraft back into balance. She could feel every vibration, every subtle pressure on the controls. The desert below blurred into streaks of brown and gold, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. She was suspended between fear and exhilaration, testing the boundaries of both herself and the machine. Harris leaned forward slightly. "Good. Now altitude drills. Push it to 500 feet. Then 1,200. Pay attention to the system responses. Don't let the fear control you." Alina's pulse quickened as she climbed higher, the wind screaming past the Apache's body. The desert stretched endlessly below, jagged canyons carving shadows that flickered and twisted. She could almost feel the whispers of every colleague who had doubted her, every superior who had blocked her from the cockpit, threading through the currents of air around her. She wasn't just flying. She was defying decades of expectation, prejudice, and assumption. Suddenly, a warning alarm blared, a simulated hydraulic failure designed to test her reflexes. The Apache shuddered violently. Alina's hands gripped the controls instinctively. She remembered the countless simulations she had run, every emergency protocol drilled into her muscle memory. Yet the cockpit felt more alive, more demanding than any simulator. The difference between theory and reality hit her like a punch to the chest. "Martinez, hydraulic pressure dropping," Harris barked over the comms. Alina's mind raced. She adjusted the cyclic and collective, stabilizing the machine. Sweat poured down her face, burning her eyes, but she refused to blink, refused to falter. Every instinct she had honed for years guided her hands, her eyes, her every movement. The Apache leaned, dipped, but she coaxed it into equilibrium. Time slowed. Every heartbeat echoed in her skull. The canyon walls below seemed to surge toward her, jagged and merciless. Yet she did not panic. She had no choice. Failure wasn't an option, not now, not ever. Slowly the machine steadied, the alarm ceased, and the desert stretched out below her, alive with golden morning light. Harris exhaled audibly through the comm. Impressive, very impressive. Most pilots would have folded under that pressure. Alina's chest heaved. Relief mingled with a surge of pride. She had faced one of the most dangerous emergency scenarios designed for a first flight and survived. Not just survived, but thrived. She realized that the Apache wasn't simply a machine. It was a test of character, of courage, of instinct. And in that moment, she understood that she had earned her place. But the test was far from over. Harris's voice cut through her triumph. "Next, we simulate a hostile environment. Radar jamming, restricted visibility. You're the only pilot in this scenario. Rely entirely on instruments and intuition." Alina's stomach tightened. She had imagined this moment, rehearsed it in her mind, yet now that it was real, the stakes seemed almost unbearable. She adjusted the Apache systems, toggled switches with precise motion, and ascended into the simulated storm. Darkness enveloped the cockpit, instruments glowing eerily, reflecting off her determined eyes. The desert below vanished, replaced by a blur of simulated radar blips and synthetic obstacles. The Apache twisted violently as a simulated missile threat appeared on the screen. Alina's instincts flared. She banked sharply, her hands moving faster than thought, executing evasive maneuvers that tested the very limits of her reflexes. Each movement demanded perfection. One hesitation, one misjudgment could end the flight in disaster. The machine roared around her, alive with energy and resistance, yet Alina commanded it with precision. As she navigated the obstacles, adrenaline surged. Every sense was heightened. The vibrations through the controls, the sound of the rotors, the faint hum of the engines, even the smell of hydraulic fluid and ozone. The Apache responded to her like an extension of herself, yet its power reminded her constantly that she was merely human. Hours seemed to compress into minutes. Alina pushed the limits of the aircraft, performing complex maneuvers she had only ever executed in simulators. Each successful action reinforced her confidence. Each minor hesitation reminded her of the razor's edge she walked. Finally, the simulation concluded. The Apache hovered, engines thrumming, lights blinking in controlled calm. Alina exhaled, her hands trembling slightly as she eased the collective. Harris's voice, steady and approving, reached her through the comms. "You did it, Martinez. You've not only flown the Apache, you've mastered it. And remember, you did it where others were expected to fail." Alina's chest swelled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The forbidden flight had tested her limits, pushed her beyond fear, and confirmed what she had always known. She belonged in the cockpit. Yet, as she guided the Apache toward a safe landing, her mind buzzed with a sobering realization. This was only the beginning. The real battles were not in simulations or tests. They awaited in combat scenarios, in missions where every decision could mean life or death, not just for her, but for everyone under her command. She had passed the first hurdle, survived the initial crucible, but the skies above held challenges that were far more ruthless and unforgiving. The sun rose higher, painting the desert in molten gold. Alina maneuvered the Apache toward the tarmac, the rotors slicing through the morning air. As the wheels touched down, her heart still pounded, but her resolve hardened. She had taken the flight that had been denied to her for so long, faced the impossible, and emerged victorious. Yet even in triumph, a question lingered, one that whispered through every shadow of the hangar, every reflection on the polished fuselage. Would the world finally recognize her, or would the system continue to resist, determined to keep her bound by invisible chains? The Apache's engine slowed to a steady hum, and Alina's gaze swept across the horizon, the desert stretching endlessly before her. Victory was hers, for now. But the storm of expectation, scrutiny, and danger loomed just beyond the horizon. She had conquered the forbidden flight, but the true test, the one that would define her legacy, was still waiting in the skies above. And as she stepped down from the cockpit, adrenaline still coursing through her veins, Alina Martinez understood one unshakable truth. Flying the Apache was no longer a dream. It was a challenge she had accepted, and she would not falter, not now, not ever. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the Apache's rotors, a sea of gold and shadow under the blazing morning sun. Captain Alina Martinez gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones. She had survived the simulations, mastered the forbidden flight, and proved to herself, and to the skeptics, that she belonged in the cockpit. Yet the real test, Harris reminded her, was not just technical skill, it was trust. Trust in the machine, in her instincts, and in the people guiding her. "Focus, Martinez," Harris's calm voice crackled through the calm. "We're going to run a series of tactical maneuvers. Think of it as a dance, speed, precision, and anticipation. Every decision you make could be life or death in a real scenario." Alina nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Her heart thundered as the Apache dipped and swerved with her commands. The desert below twisted and turned, the shadows of mesas and canyons rushing past. Her mind raced, calculating trajectories, anticipating shifts in air pressure, monitoring every instrument, every gauge, every subtle tremor. The first exercise was a low-altitude canyon run, a maneuver designed to test reflexes, spatial awareness, and split-second decision-making. Alina adjusted the collective, dipping the Apache between two jagged cliffs. The air screamed past her face, and the rotors sliced the wind like a blade. Her stomach lurched as the canyon walls rushed by with dizzying speed, but she felt a strange clarity take over. The machine responded as if it were an extension of her body. Every instinct, honed over years of simulations, sharpened in the crucible of reality. Suddenly, a gust of wind caught the helicopter, tilting it dangerously. The canyon walls loomed closer than ever. Alina's hands moved faster than thought, coaxing the Apache back into alignment. The rotors vibrated violently under her touch, a reminder that the margin for error was razor-thin. For a moment, fear surged through her, primal and raw, threatening to overtake her focus. Then she recalled the Admiral's words, "You've already proven them wrong." The memory ignited a fire within her. She would not fail, she would not be denied. She pushed the Apache to its limits, navigating the canyon with precision that surprised even herself. Harris's voice, calm and steady, guided her. "Good. Keep your eyes on the instruments, trust the machine, and trust yourself. You're doing perfectly." The second exercise escalated the stakes, simulated enemy fire. Digital targets popped up on the heads-up display, blipping in rapid succession. Alina's fingers moved across the controls instinctively, firing missiles, evading imaginary projectiles, and maintaining perfect altitude and speed. The Apache danced through the air with deadly grace, each maneuver a testament to human skill interfacing with machine power. Her mind and body worked in harmony, the hours of preparation, rejection, and defiance crystallizing into instinctual performance. But as she executed a sharp banking maneuver to avoid simulated anti-aircraft fire, the Apache shuddered violently. A warning light flashed red, a minor system anomaly, but enough to disrupt the delicate balance she had achieved. "Hydraulics fluctuating," Harris barked. "Adjust now." Alina's pulse spiked. She focused, ignoring the adrenaline threatening to overwhelm her. Hands flying over the controls, she stabilized the Apache, coaxing it back into equilibrium. The system light blinked green, signaling stability, and for a moment the roar of the rotors seemed to quiet, as if the helicopter itself was acknowledging her mastery. "Excellent," Harris said, voice steady. "Most pilots panic in this situation. You adapted." Alina exhaled, sweat stinging her eyes. Relief surged, but she knew this was just the beginning. The final challenge was approaching, a night navigation exercise through a maze of canyons and artificial obstacles, with radar interference and simulated communications blackout. Only one pilot had to rely entirely on skill, intuition, and trust in the Apache. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in molten gold as she prepared for the night flight. Alina's stomach tightened, a mixture of anticipation and fear. Night maneuvers had always been the true test. One error in low visibility could be catastrophic. She adjusted the cockpit lighting, relying on the heads-up display and instrument panels to guide her path. The Apache hummed beneath her like a coiled predator, ready to strike or ready to obey. As she lifted off, the first shadows of night crept over the canyons, twisting and warping perception. Every ridge, every cliff became a potential hazard. The simulated radar interference added a layer of complexity that tested every ounce of her skill. Alina's hands danced over the controls, her eyes scanning instruments, anticipating threats and reacting instantly. The Apache responded seamlessly, an extension of her instincts. Then a simulated missile blipped into view, an enemy threat in the darkness. Her reaction was instantaneous. She banked sharply, pulling the Apache into a tight roll, dodging the simulated projectile by mere meters. The rotors vibrated violently, the controls demanding precision and perfect timing. Alina's chest pounded, sweat cascading down her face, but she refused to falter. "Keep going," Harris's voice urged. "Trust yourself, trust the machine, trust your instincts." Time became elastic, stretching and compressing as Alina navigated the maze. Each obstacle required perfect coordination. Every decision had immediate consequences. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, the invisible eyes of doubters and skeptics watching, yet it propelled her forward rather than holding her back. Hours or perhaps minutes, time had lost all meaning. Later, she emerged from the canyon maze into the open desert. The Apache hovered, engines thrumming a steady, victorious cadence. Alina's chest heaved, every muscle screaming, yet a triumphant exhilaration coursed through her veins. She had faced every challenge the instructors could throw at her, and she had survived. More than survived, she had excelled. Harris's voice broke through the silence. Captain Martinez, I've flown with many pilots, seen exceptional talent and even some legends, but I've never seen someone adapt under pressure like you just did. You've earned this. You belong here. Alina's chest swelled with pride, but a sobering thought struck her. The Apache had tested her limits, but real missions would be far less forgiving. Lives would be at stake, decisions would be instantaneous, and no simulator or instructor would guide her hand. The training had proven her skill, but could she maintain that precision when the stakes were lethal? As she guided the Apache back toward the base under a sky now flecked with stars, she felt a mix of exhilaration and foreboding. The forbidden flight had transformed into mastery, yet the journey ahead remained uncertain. Every lesson she had learned, every barrier she had broken, had led her to this point, but the greatest challenges were still over the horizon. Alina landed the Apache with steady hands, the rotors slowing in a controlled hum. She climbed down from the cockpit, muscles trembling, adrenaline still coursing. The desert night stretched out around her, vast and silent, a reminder that the sky held both promise and peril. The first forbidden flight was complete. She had faced turbulence, simulated enemy fire, and the shadow of doubt, and emerged triumphant. Yet the real test awaited, missions where the Apache's deadly power would be real, where trust in herself and the machine would be tested under the harshest circumstances imaginable. And as Alina Martinez looked up at the night sky, scattered with stars and possibility, she realized one truth. She had earned the right to fly, but earning the right to survive and to succeed would require more than skill. It would demand courage, instinct, and a resolve stronger than she had ever known. The horizon beyond the desert held countless unknowns, dangers, and opportunities. And as the base lights flickered beneath her, Alina understood that the forbidden flight had only just begun. Thunderclouds rolled in over the desert horizon like dark sentinels, casting jagged shadows across the canyons and mesas below. Captain Alina Martinez adjusted her headset, her fingers gripping the Apache's controls as the rotors churned the turbulent air. Today's mission was a live tactical exercise, far beyond simulations, beyond controlled tests. The scenario was simple in concept: navigate a hostile environment, locate and neutralize targets, and return safely. But the variables, the wind, the storm, the unknown, made it anything but simple. Harris's voice crackled through the calm yet urgent. Martinez, radar is unreliable due to atmospheric interference. GPS signals may drop. You're on your own. Rely on instruments, instincts, and the machine. Alina's stomach tightened. She had faced difficult maneuvers before, even simulated emergencies, but this was different. There were no instructors guiding her hand, no simulated safety net. Everything depended on her judgment, split-second reactions, and her connection to the Apache. The rotors hummed, vibrating through her bones as she guided the helicopter into the heart of the storm. Dark clouds swirled above, lightning crackling across the sky. Rain lashed the canopy, obscuring vision, blurring the rugged desert landscape into an abstract smear of color and shadow. Every gust of wind threatened to tilt the Apache violently, forcing Alina to react with precision and instinct. Her mind raced, coordinating altitude adjustments, rotor pitch, and speed. One miscalculation could send the helicopter tumbling into the canyon walls below. Yet as adrenaline surged, a strange clarity emerged. Years of training, simulations, and denials coalesced into instinctive knowledge. She didn't just control the Apache, she danced with it, anticipating its responses, coaxing it through the storm. Suddenly, a warning light flashed red on the instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure was dropping. The Apache shuddered violently, a violent reminder of the machine's raw power and the razor-thin margin for error. Elena's pulse accelerated. "Harris, hydraulic pressure," she shouted, voice tense but steady. "Stay calm, follow emergency protocol, stabilize now." Hands moving faster than thought, she adjusted the cyclic and collective, navigating the Apache through turbulent wind currents while monitoring instruments for further anomalies. The helicopter leaned dangerously as lightning illuminated the canyon walls, jagged and unforgiving. Time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat an eternity. Elena's mind flashed back to every obstacle she had faced. The years of denials, the whispered doubts of colleagues, the unspoken bias that had kept her from the Apache. Every insult, every barrier, every closed door became fuel, transforming fear into determination. She whispered under her breath, "I belong here. I will not fail." The Apache responded to her commands, though every maneuver demanded flawless execution. She twisted, banked, and leveled with a precision that would have impressed even the most seasoned pilots. Her instincts guided her, but so did sheer willpower, the unyielding drive to prove herself, to claim the sky that had always been just out of reach. Then came another challenge, a sudden electrical malfunction simulated by the training system. Instrument panels flickered, radar briefly went dark, and the Apache's stability systems hesitated. Elena's hands moved instinctively across the controls, compensating for every fluctuation, stabilizing the aircraft mid-air. Lightning cracked dangerously close, illuminating the cockpit in stark, white flashes, and her heart raced with the rhythm of the storm outside. "Harris, I've got this under control," she said, teeth clenched, adrenaline surging. "You better," he replied, voice calm but firm, "because out there no one else will." The storm intensified, wind gusting unpredictably, rain slicing across the canopy like shards of glass. Elena pushed the Apache into a steep climb, dodging imaginary enemy positions and terrain hazards. Her mind tracked dozens of variables at once: speed, altitude, rotor angle, instrument readings, radar signals, simulated enemy fire. Every sense was heightened, each nerve ending alive with tension. She felt the Apache as though it were part of her body. Every vibration, every tilt, every subtle motion transmitted directly to her instincts. She banked sharply to avoid a canyon wall that appeared out of nowhere, her stomach lurching as the machine leaned violently. A split-second miscalculation would have spelled disaster. Yet, despite the storm, despite the failures, despite the crushing weight of expectation, Elena guided the Apache flawlessly. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed in a blur of lightning, wind, and rain. When the storm finally began to break, the desert opened up beneath her, shimmering with moonlight reflecting off the wet rocks. The Apache hovered, engines humming, systems stable once more. Elena exhaled, chest heaving, adrenaline still coursing. She had faced the storm and emerged triumphant. Harris's voice cut through the cockpit, calmer now but laced with awe. "Captain Martinez, that was exceptional. You handled extreme stress, mechanical failure, and hostile conditions that would overwhelm most pilots. You've proven what I suspected. You belong in the Apache cockpit." Elena's hands relaxed slightly on the controls, but her mind remained alert. The storm had been a trial by fire, testing her skill, composure, and trust in the machine. But even as triumph coursed through her, she realized something sobering. This was a microcosm of real combat conditions. In a live scenario, the consequences would be far more severe. Lives would depend on split-second decisions, and hesitation could cost everything. The Apache descended toward the base under a clearing sky, the desert illuminated by moonlight and streaks of lightning fading in the distance. Elena's heart still pounded from the intensity of the storm, yet pride surged alongside exhaustion. She had not only survived the forbidden flight and its trials, she had mastered them. Her skill had met every test and exceeded expectations. But the storm had also revealed something deeper: her capacity for focus under pressure, her ability to transform fear into decisive action, and her instinctive connection with the machine. The storm had been a teacher, a crucible that forged her confidence, and a reminder that mastery was as much about mental fortitude as technical skill. As she landed the Apache with precise control, the rotors slowing, Alina's mind wandered briefly to the skeptics who had doubted her for so long. Every sideways glance, every whispered comment, every barrier imposed by tradition and bias now seemed powerless in the face of what she had accomplished. She had flown the Apache under conditions no one expected her to survive, and she had succeeded. Yet even in victory, the lingering question remained. Could she replicate this performance under the chaos of real combat? Would she maintain her composure when lives were on the line, when the stakes were higher than any simulation could convey? Alina knew that proving herself today was only the beginning. The Apache had tested her body, her mind, and her courage, but the skis would demand even more in the missions to come. The desert stretched beneath her as she climbed out of the cockpit, muscles trembling, lungs heaving, and adrenaline still coursing. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, a reminder of the storm she had conquered. Harris approached, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. "You've earned this, Martinez," he said quietly. "Not just the right to fly the Apache, but the right to be trusted in it. Remember, the storm may come again, out there in the real world, but you've proven you can rise to meet it." Alina nodded, a mix of exhaustion, pride, and anticipation swelling in her chest. The forbidden flight had evolved into mastery, but the horizon held new challenges, missions that would test everything she had learned and everything she had yet to discover. The storm within her had been conquered, but the storm outside in the vast expanse of desert skis and beyond was only just beginning. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dissipating clouds, Alina Martinez understood one unshakable truth. She was no longer just a pilot denied entry into the Apache cockpit. She was a force capable of commanding it, surviving its challenges, and redefining what it meant to belong. The skis were hers to earn, and she would not yield to anyone who tried to stand in her way. The early morning desert was bathed in pale gold, the wind carrying the scent of sand and ozone from the previous night's storm. Captain Alina Martinez tightened her gloves as she approached the Apache, its rotors already slicing through the air with a low, menacing hum. Today was no simulation. This was a live tactical exercise, a mission scenario designed to test every skill she possessed, every ounce of courage she could summon. Lieutenant Colonel Harris met her at the base of the steps, clipboard tucked under his arm, expression unreadable. "Martinez," he said, voice low, "today's exercise is unlike any you've faced. Communications may be intermittent, radar is partially disabled, terrain is complex and unforgiving. You will need to rely on skill, intuition, and courage. One mistake and the scenario ends immediately." Alina swallowed, a mix of adrenaline and apprehension tightening her chest. She had survived simulations, mastered forbidden flights, endured storms, and handled mechanical anomalies. Yet the thought of a live mission scenario, even under controlled conditions, elevated her pulse to an almost unbearable rhythm. This was the crucible, the point where skill met instinct and fear met resolve. Harris gestured toward the cockpit. "Climb in. The mission starts the moment you lift off." Alina's boots clicked against the metal steps as she entered the cockpit. She settled into the seat, strapping herself in with meticulous care. The controls hummed beneath her fingers, alive and responsive. The Apache was more than a machine. It was an extension of her body, a partner she had come to know intimately. "Systems check," she muttered, scanning every dial, every readout. Engines, hydraulics, targeting systems, all green. The desert stretched beneath her like a living map of challenges yet to come. The rotors lifted, slicing the morning air as she ascended into the sky. Below, the desert shimmered, a tapestry of jagged cliffs and deep canyons, now rendered more treacherous by the shadows of dawn. The first objective appeared on her display. Locate and engage a series of simulated hostile targets scattered across the terrain. Harris's voice guided her, calm but unyielding. Focus. Use terrain to your advantage. Visual confirmation when radar fails. You've trained for this. Alina's pulse accelerated, every sense attuned to the environment. She banked sharply, diving into a canyon to avoid radar detection. The Apache responded seamlessly, but the close proximity to the jagged rock walls made every maneuver razor-thin in margin. Her stomach lurched, and sweat streaked her face, but she pushed fear aside, relying on training and instinct. A target appeared on the heads-up display, simulated enemy combatants positioned along a ridge. Alina adjusted the targeting system, firing precision missiles that detonated with controlled force, eliminating the threat. The satisfaction of hitting the first target was tempered by the knowledge that the next objective demanded even more precision. The exercise was designed to escalate, forcing pilots to adapt under pressure. The second target required low-altitude navigation through a narrow canyon while simultaneously tracking moving targets. Alina's heart pounded as the Apache dipped and twisted, rotors slicing the air with a fierce growl. The canyon walls loomed dangerously close, forcing split-second adjustments that tested every skill she had acquired. One miscalculation, one hesitation, and she could strike the rock face with catastrophic results. She focused, tuning out everything but the machine and the environment. Her instincts guided her hands, her eyes scanned instruments and terrain simultaneously, and her mind calculated trajectories faster than thought. The Apache responded as if alive, bending and twisting under her control. She eliminated the targets with surgical precision, her adrenaline spiking as each successful strike reinforced her confidence. But the scenario had more in store. As she exited the canyon, a simulated communications blackout plunged her into isolation. No contact with Harris, no radar assistance, just her skill and the Apache systems. Alina's breath hitched. The silence was deafening, the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical force. She reminded herself of the Admiral's words, "You've already proven them wrong." The next objective was a steep climb to a high ridge, where enemy artillery was positioned. The Apache groaned under the strain as Alina pulled hard on the controls, forcing the machine to respond to her every command. Lightning from a passing storm flashed faintly on the horizon, a reminder that nature itself could challenge her resolve. Suddenly, a system warning flared. A simulated engine anomaly triggered to test emergency response. The Apache lurched violently, tipping dangerously as Alina's mind raced. Instinct took over. Hands flying over the controls, she adjusted the collective and cyclic with flawless precision, stabilizing the aircraft just in time. The adrenaline surged through her veins, a heady mix of fear and triumph. "Impressive," Harris's voice returned over the comm, crackling through interference. "Most pilots would have panicked. You adapted. Well done." Alina exhaled, though her chest still heaved from the intensity. The mission wasn't over. The final objective awaited: navigate a high-speed route through multiple canyons under low visibility while targeting simulated hostile positions. Every maneuver required split-second decisions, flawless coordination, and unwavering courage. The Apache darted through the canyons like a predator. Alina's eyes flicked between instruments and terrain, every movement precise and controlled. She fired at multiple targets, avoided simulated anti-aircraft fire, and maintained perfect altitude and trajectory. The desert below twisted in abstract streaks of gold and shadow, a dizzying blur of danger and opportunity. As she completed the final maneuver, the Apache soared above the canyon rim. Below, the simulated battlefield lay in ruins, objectives completed with surgical precision. Alina's hands relaxed slightly on the controls, though her mind remained alert. She had done it. She had survived the live tactical scenario. She had proven beyond doubt that she belonged in the Apache cockpit. Harris's voice, now calm and approving, came through. "Captain Martinez, you've exceeded every expectation. You've completed a mission scenario designed to break the most seasoned pilots. You've proven skill, composure, and courage beyond measure. You've earned your place." Alina felt a rush of triumph, but it was tempered by awareness. Today was controlled. Today was training. Real missions would be harsher, less forgiving, and far more dangerous. The Apache had tested her limits, and she had exceeded them. But the true crucible awaited beyond the base, in the skis of conflict where every decision had life-or-death consequences. As the Apache descended toward the base, engines humming with controlled power, Alina felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The forbidden flight had evolved into mastery, and mastery had been tested under extreme conditions. Yet she knew the journey was far from over. Stepping out of the cockpit, muscles trembling, adrenaline still coursing, she gazed at the Apache. Its rotors slowed to a gentle hum, but its presence remained commanding. She had faced storms, mechanical failures, and hostile terrain, and she had emerged victorious. She had earned respect, not just from instructors or skeptics, but from herself. Yet a shadow of anticipation remained. Beyond the training grounds, beyond simulations and controlled exercises, real challenges awaited. Missions where lives depended on split-second decisions, where failure was not an option, and where courage would be tested in its rawest form. Alina Martinez understood one truth: mastering the Apache was not the end, it was the beginning. The desert stretched endlessly under the morning sun, whispering of possibilities and dangers yet to come. Alina's eyes glinted with determination. She had survived, proven herself, and broken through barriers imposed by doubt and tradition. But the sky held more trials, and she would face them, undaunted, unyielding, unstoppable. As she walked away from the Apache, the wind carrying a faint echo of the rotor's hum, she realized that the forbidden flight had been only the first chapter. The true story, one of courage, skill, and legacy, was just beginning. The night was unnervingly silent, broken only by the hum of the Apache's engine slicing through the desert darkness. Captain Alina Martinez adjusted her helmet, the cool interior pressing against her temples as her fingers hovered over the controls. This wasn't a simulation. This was the first real combat scenario, a live-fire exercise with real munitions and unpredictable targets designed to replicate actual battlefield conditions. Every instinct, every ounce of training, and every shred of courage she possessed would be tested to the absolute limit. Lieutenant Colonel Harris's voice came through the comms, steady but sharp. "Martinez, targets are moving, terrain is unpredictable, and radar feedback is intermittent. You're on your own. Trust the machine and trust yourself." Alina's chest tightened, adrenaline surging. The Apache vibrated beneath her like a coiled predator, eager to obey her commands. She had trained for this day for years, but the reality of a live-fire combat scenario made her pulse race faster than any simulation ever had. One mistake here could mean destruction, figuratively and literally. She lifted off into the night sky, the rotors slicing through the air with a thunderous growl. The desert below seemed endless, cloaked in shadows that shifted with every movement. Her eyes flicked across the instrument panel, targeting systems, altitude, speed, and fuel, all critical factors she had to balance simultaneously. The first targets appeared, simulated enemy combatants equipped with live markers. Alina's hands moved instinctively over the controls, locking onto targets and launching precision missiles. Explosions erupted in the darkness, illuminating the desert in brief, brilliant flashes. Each strike had to be perfect. Miscalculations could set off chain reactions or compromise her mission. Suddenly, the Apache shuddered violently. A warning light flashed, simulated hydraulic failure, designed to test her emergency response under combat conditions. Alina's stomach lurched, but she didn't hesitate. Hands flying over the controls, she stabilized the aircraft, coaxing it into balance while continuing to engage targets. "Impressive, Martinez," Harris said, his voice calm but intense. "Most pilots would have panicked. Keep focus, this is far from over." The exercise escalated rapidly. Enemy positions multiplied, moving unpredictably through rugged terrain. Radar feedback faltered intermittently, forcing Alina to rely entirely on her instincts, visual confirmation, and instruments. The Apache was alive beneath her hands, each movement requiring precision, coordination, and anticipation. One wrong tilt, one delayed reaction, and disaster would strike. Lightning flashed faintly on the horizon, remnants of a distant storm, illuminating the jagged cliffs and canyons. Alina banked sharply to avoid a simulated projectile, the Apache tilting violently as she fought for stability. The wind screamed past the cockpit, amplifying the tension and testing her focus. Then came the unexpected, a sudden communication blackout, perfectly timed by the instructors. Harris's calm voice vanished, leaving Alina alone with the machine, the storm, and the desert. The silence was deafening. She could hear only the rotor's rhythmic hum and her own heartbeat. Every decision now rested entirely on her judgment. She adjusted the collective, leveling the Apache, then executed a tight roll to evade another simulated threat. Her fingers moved faster than thought, eyes scanning instruments and terrain simultaneously. The desert below twisted in abstract streaks of shadow and moonlight, a dangerous maze that demanded complete concentration. Minutes, or was it hours, passed in a blur of evasive maneuvers, precision targeting, and survival instinct. Alina eliminated targets with surgical accuracy, her focus sharpened by the isolation. Fear still lingered at the edges of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. She had become one with the Apache, her instincts perfectly synced with the machine. Then came the final objective, a high-speed approach to a heavily defended simulated enemy base. The terrain was jagged, radar interference intense, and targets numerous. Alina knew the margin for error was non-existent. She banked sharply, diving into a canyon that narrowed to mere meters between rock walls. The rotors screamed in protest, but she held steady, trusting every ounce of skill and courage she had cultivated. Simulated anti-aircraft fire erupted around her. Explosions lit the canyon walls, casting stark shadows that twisted and danced in the darkness. Alina's hands moved in flawless coordination, adjusting altitude, speed, and angle while targeting enemy positions with precision. The Apache shuddered under the strain, yet she guided it with deft, instinctive control. A warning light blinked red, another simulated system failure, this one affecting targeting accuracy. Alina gritted her teeth, focusing on manual adjustments. Every second stretched into an eternity. Her mind raced, calculating trajectories, distances, and speed. The Apache shivered violently, yet she coaxed it into stability, completing the final strike with pinpoint precision. The desert was silent once more, the simulated battlefield illuminated only by faint moonlight. Alina hovered above the terrain, chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had completed the first real combat scenario, the most demanding test of skill, focus, and courage in her life. Harris's voice returned over the comms, calm but infused with awe. "Captain Martinez, you've exceeded expectations. That was more than skill, it was instinct, composure, and courage under extreme pressure. You've proven yourself." Alina exhaled, muscles trembling, sweat streaking her face. Pride surged, tempered by awareness. Today she had demonstrated mastery of the Apache in live combat conditions. But she also understood the sobering reality. The scenarios were controlled. Real conflict would be harsher, less forgiving, and far more unpredictable. The Apache's power demanded not just skill, but unwavering courage and split-second judgment. As she guided the helicopter back toward the base, the desert stretching beneath her in moonlit silver, Alina reflected on how far she had come. Years of denials, whispered doubts, and forbidden flights had led to this moment. She had not only survived, they had underestimated her, and she had proven them wrong. Yet the horizon remained uncertain. The rotors slowed as she landed, the Apache settling with controlled grace. She climbed down from the cockpit, legs trembling, heart still pounding. Harris met her with a steady gaze, placing a hand on her shoulder. Martinez, you've earned your place in this cockpit, not just by skill but by courage, determination, and resilience. The sky is yours, but be ready. The real battles are just beyond the horizon." Alina nodded, the weight of responsibility settling over her. She had faced storms, mechanical failures, hostile terrain, and live combat scenarios, and emerged triumphant. Yet she knew that proving herself in training was only part of the journey. Real danger awaited, where lives depended on every decision, and hesitation could mean disaster. The desert stretched endlessly into the night, illuminated by the last faint traces of moonlight. Alina Martinez felt the exhilaration of victory, tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. She had earned the right to fly the Apache, to master its power, and to command it under the harshest conditions. But she also understood one unshakable truth. The sky demanded more than skill. It demanded courage, instinct, and an unbreakable resolve. As she looked up at the stars scattered across the desert sky, Alina realized the forbidden flight had evolved into mastery into combat proficiency. But the ultimate test, the one that would define her legacy, was still waiting. And she would face it, unflinching, because she had already learned what it meant to rise against doubt, defy expectation, and claim her place among the legends of the sky. The desert air was thick with tension, the horizon blurred by heat waves and dust kicked up from the Apache's rotors. Captain Alina Martinez gripped the controls, her knuckles white beneath the gloves, eyes locked on the rugged terrain below. This was no simulation, no controlled exercise. Today she was leading the final mission scenario, a real-time operation designed to test everything she had trained for: instinct, skill, courage, and leadership under extreme pressure. Lieutenant Colonel Harris's voice cut through the cockpit comms, calm but urgent. "Martinez, this is the culmination. Multiple targets, dynamic threats, unpredictable terrain. Your team relies on your decisions. Lead them or the scenario fails. No margin for error." Alina's chest tightened. She had mastered simulations, survived storms, mechanical failures, and live-fire scenarios. But now she carried not only her own safety on her shoulders but the responsibility for a full team's performance. The stakes were real. One wrong decision, one hesitation, could result in catastrophe. As the Apache ascended, Alina felt the familiar hum of the engines, a vibration that had become almost comforting. This was her domain, the forbidden cockpit she had fought so hard to claim. She adjusted the collective, banked sharply to avoid jagged cliffs, and scanned the desert below, spotting the first of multiple enemy positions. Her fingers moved over the targeting system with instinctive precision, launching precision missiles that obliterated the targets in controlled explosions. "Good," Harris's voice acknowledged. "But stay sharp. The terrain will change and so will the threats." Alina's pulse raced. The mission was evolving rapidly, threats multiplying faster than she had anticipated. Enemy positions appeared unpredictably, radar intermittently failing due to simulated electronic warfare. She had no choice but to rely entirely on instincts and intuition honed over years of forbidden flights, storms, and live-fire exercises. The Apache weaved through narrow canyons, every twist and turn requiring split-second judgment. Her team, 2 other helicopters, followed her lead, relying on her decisions for safety and success. She felt the weight of their trust pressing on her like a physical force, sharpening her focus rather than breaking it. Every maneuver had to be perfect, every command precise. Suddenly, a simulated anti-aircraft system erupted from a cliff face. The Apache shuddered violently as Alina banked sharply, evading the explosion by mere meters. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the rotors, but she maintained control, guiding her team through the chaos with skill and authority. The desert below became a blur of shadow and fire, jagged cliffs illuminated by explosions, the wind screaming past the cockpit. A warning light flashed, hydraulic pressure unstable. Alina's stomach lurched, but she didn't falter. Years of training, denied opportunities, and forbidden flights had prepared her for this exact moment. Her hands moved over the controls instinctively, stabilizing the Apache while simultaneously targeting the next enemy positions. "Hydraulics fluctuating," Harris barked. "Under control," Elena shouted, voice steady. Her fingers danced over the controls, coaxing the Apache back into stability. The storm of chaos, both literal and metaphorical, surrounded her, yet she remained calm, focused, and decisive. The final objective appeared: a high-speed approach to a heavily fortified ridge where simulated enemy artillery threatened her team's extraction route. She banked sharply, dodging a simulated missile, the Apache tilting violently as the rotors vibrated through her arms. Her instincts screamed at her, every muscle straining, but her mind remained razor-sharp. This was the culmination of every challenge she had faced: the forbidden flight, storms, mechanical failures, live fire exercises, all leading to this crucible. Explosions erupted around her, illuminating the terrain in staccato flashes. Elena guided the Apache with near-perfect precision, simultaneously coordinating with her team, targeting multiple threats and maintaining altitude. Her nerves burned with intensity, but her focus never wavered. She had earned this moment through years of struggle, rejection, and defiance. Then, through the chaos, a calm voice entered her mind, the words she had longed to hear but never expected. The Admiral's 5 words, spoken during a brief ceremony earlier in her career, now echoing like a mantra. "Martinez, you belong in command." The words struck her like lightning, igniting a surge of clarity and courage. She realized that the obstacles, the denials, the whispers of doubt had all been tests, not barriers but preparation. She belonged here in the cockpit in the storm, leading her team through impossible challenges. Every instinct, every skill, every ounce of courage was hers to command. With renewed determination, Elena executed the final maneuvers. She led her team through the ridge, neutralizing enemy positions with precision, and navigated the extraction route flawlessly. Every explosion, every gust of wind, every vibration of the Apache was met with decisive action. She was no longer merely surviving. She was in command, commanding the machine, the team, and her destiny. The final moments of the scenario stretched into tense eternity. Her team followed perfectly, trusting her judgment implicitly. She guided the Apache through the last canyon, emerging into open desert as the simulation concluded. The rotor wash stirred the sand into ghostly clouds, illuminated by the early morning sun. Silence fell, broken only by the steady hum of the engines. Harris's voice returned, calm and reverent. "Captain Martinez, you've completed the most challenging mission scenario in this program. You've demonstrated skill, courage, composure, and leadership beyond anything we could have anticipated. You've earned your place, not just in this cockpit, but as a true leader." Elena exhaled, muscles trembling, chest heaving, sweat streaking her face. Relief and triumph mingled with exhaustion. She had faced storms, mechanical failures, hostile terrain, live fire scenarios, and now a full tactical mission with real stakes, and she had emerged not only victorious but commanding. Stepping down from the Apache, she felt the weight of accomplishment settle over her like a mantle. The desert stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of trials she had conquered. Her peers, skeptics, and instructors watched in awe, no longer doubting her presence in the cockpit. The forbidden flight was no longer forbidden. She had earned not just the right to fly, it had evolved into mastery, courage, and leadership. As the sun rose, illuminating the desert in golden brilliance, Elena felt the final, undeniable truth: she belonged. She belonged in the Apache, in command, and in the sky. The Admiral's words echoed through her mind, a declaration and a promise. "Martinez, you belong in command." She had faced every barrier, every test, every storm, and now she had claimed her place among the best. The sky was hers, not by permission but by merit, courage, and indomitable will. The desert wind whispered through the Apache's rotors, carrying the echoes of trials overcome and victories earned. Elena Martinez looked toward the horizon, eyes bright, heart unyielding, knowing that no obstacle, storm, or doubt could ever deny her what she had proven: her skill, her courage, and her rightful place in the sky. And as she walked away from the Apache, the sun rising behind her, she realized that every denial, every whisper of doubt, every forbidden flight had led her to this moment. The moment she finally belonged, commanding the skies and shaping her legacy.